Chapter 67, Rat Boss. Just then, Snow came out of the nurse's office. "I can act." He flinched as Godfrey's glare locked on him. Snow had seen Godfrey angry several times, but the look in his eyes right now was beyond the others. It was filled with so much anger, it shrouded him with a horrifying aura. This wasn't the same Godfrey that walked in seeking peace. This part of Godfrey made sweat coat his palms. He couldn't believe it was this fear. "We'll talk later," Godfrey said, walking away with wide, powerful strides. He has always stood his ground without knowing he's a king tier. Just what is he going to do now that he knows? Godfrey stormed into the class. Everyone swiftly noticed his mood as he went straight to his backpack, swung it over his shoulder, and marched toward the exit. Not one glance at anyone, not even Isolde. "We have an after-party, won't you attend?" Edwin asked with raised eyebrows. "I won't," his response echoed as he left the classroom. On his way out of the building, his steps slowed as he saw Isolde leaning against the wall, her arms crossed. Exhaling sharply, he approached her. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Home." "Then you'll need this." Isolde handed over the core to Godfrey and patted his chest. "I hope you'll come back soon." She vanished in a flash of violet. A fleeting smile graced his face before he continued walking. Several hours later, it was nightfall, and without the moon, the night was even darker. Yet in a black hood, Godfrey made his way to a fenced house on the outskirts of Manhattan. He had picked up another call for aid from his platform, apparently another Green Gate dungeon. There were several, but this one seemed more probable to be authentic. And this was what he needed to finally unseal the third night. He had already booked his flight for the next day. What remained was having another night amongst the ranks of his summons. At the gate he knocked, and after some time, a fat woman came out. He could hear the sound of livestock within her farm. "Who are you?" she asked with a frown. "I'm Golden Knight. I saw your post about the Green Gate dungeon," Godfrey replied. "But you're just a high school student. I thought you were a startup guild," the woman replied. "I've handled other cases, even a Defend the Fort dungeon, which has a high death rate, as you must have seen on my platform. I can handle this." The woman thought about it and nodded. Then, she pointed at a mansion that only had its walls standing at the top of a hill. "That's the place. I have a gauge that I use to measure the mana percentage of my livestock, and it's been reading really high every time I get close to that mansion. I mean, really high." "I'll deal with it," Godfrey replied and walked up the grassy hill. When he got to the top, what stood before him must have once been considered a mighty structure, but right now, it looked like it had been bombed. It was quiet. Godfrey could only hear his own sneakers against the grass, but the moment he walked through the door, everything changed. It still looked like the mansion, but much bigger, like a hall with stairs a dozen meters away. Two diagrams flared, bringing light to the dark place as two Golden Knights stepped out. Ballista, after absorbing the dungeon core, had risen to 5.9. So he was 5.9, while Mountain was 5. Rats, several of them, the size of bulls, rushed down at the sight of them. Seeing the multitude of dirty brown rats with massive teeth and claws didn't faze Godfrey. His eyes remained steady as Ballista entered blackout state, summoning 30 bow knights. Mountain followed suit, summoning 20 sword and shield knights. The grand hall became tight as a small army of heavy-looking knights in massive golden armor clashed with a flood of giant rats. In the chaos, Godfrey took bold steps, ascending the staircase to the next floor. No rat could touch him as Mountain and Ballista stood at his right and left. Numbers, a trait that usually overwhelmed summoners, lost its fangs before him. Upon reaching the second floor, he saw a huge, 7-foot-tall rat with fur that seemed to emit motes of rot. Its crimson eyes locked on them, and it moved. In a blur of brown and crimson, it was upon them. Mountain lifted his Achilles shield, blocking the impact. His ironclad boots broke through the hard stone floor as he skidded backward. Ballista knocked an arrow in that instant and launched it. The arrow pierced the rat, but it didn't react. It came right at Godfrey. Godfrey went toward the beast head-on, activating Echo and manifesting a longsword. Before he could collide with the beast, Ballista slammed him away and blocked the rat's mouth from biting off his head with his giant bow. Mountain slammed the rat into the wall with his shield, raising his sword to pierce right through its chest. The rat slapped him off, only to receive 2 huge arrows right into its eyes. Godfrey, on the other hand, noticed his knight's armor was being corroded at a fast pace because of the motes that fell on them when they made contact with the rat boss. It was the reason Ballista pushed him out of the way. The rat lunged at Ballista, who leaped back, falling right back to the ground floor as he fired 3 arrows that multiplied into 9, piercing the rat from different sides. Ballista collapsed on the ground, the rat falling on top of him, engulfing him in its motes. Godfrey swiftly retrieved both knights into his soul space. The moment he did, the others vanished, leaving behind a mansion filled with slaughtered giant rats. With bold steps, Godfrey went to the wall where the dungeon core was embedded. He sank his fingers into the hard concrete and pulled the core out with a grunt. It was time for his third night. As the dungeon faded away, he was back in the abandoned, roofless mansion. He looked up at the dark sky and shut his eyes. In the next moment, Godfrey appeared in his soul space, right in Ballista's chambers. The Bow Knight captain sat on his throne, the rot still on every part of his regal armored figure, but it was slowly fading. Luckily, the soul space had some sort of preservative and healing effect. Small damages could easily be dealt with at the cost of a little time. Godfrey walked up to him and stretched forth the dungeon core. "Here, you did well." Ballista replied with a heavy nod, the thick chainmail around his neck making soft metallic sounds with the movement of his head. As he held the dungeon core, its pure mana flowed into his body, causing the rot to fade as the sheen of his armor grew bright once more, especially the 2 sun emblems at both cheeks of his helm. His cloak fluttered without air as a faint golden light rippled out of him. Ballista had risen to 6. Godfrey turned, watching as the stone covering where both parts of the double door joined fell off, withering into nothing before touching the floor. With slow steps, he came close to the door and paused. Godfrey lifted his head, looking at the massive door, over 15 feet tall and broad. He pressed his palms against it and pushed inward, revealing a staircase of about 20 steps leading upward. Godfrey climbed the staircase and stood in a rectangular hall that had pillars on both sides. At the other end was darkness, but within that darkness were 2 golden eyes staring right back at him. To his left was another door, and to the right was a circular hole in the wall that allowed bright light from outside to envelope the place. But what it truly did was illuminate the other door, as the throne of his third summon was shrouded in shadows. Godfrey looked at the writing etched on the stone. "The light in the shadows," he muttered. "I have waited for this day, Duke Godfrey." A rumbling voice, like thunder and lightning warring in the clouds, rolled out, along with the heavy metallic sound of a mighty sword being pulled from stone. What followed next were deep, metallic footsteps, as a towering, 8-foot-tall knight clad in armor, with the bulk almost rivaling mountain, emerged. His golden armor gleamed, unleashing its brilliance at the touch of light. His head was hidden beneath a white, almost tattered hood, but from the darkness within glowed 2 golden eyes. The hood came down to a cloth wrapped around his neck and shoulders, and from behind, his cloak flowed, bearing the proud emblem of the sun. From beneath the hood, silver hair fell from both sides, resting against his thick chest plate. A white loincloth fluttered between his legs, and a great sword, 6 feet in length, was held at the blade. Godfrey couldn't help but squint as this walking thunderous tank went down on one knee, held the great sword by its hilt, and plunged it into the stone. "My prince," the great sword knight bowed his head, gleaming brightly under the illumination of sunlight pouring in from the hole. Naturally, Godfrey was still a prince, but now bore the official title of duke, granting him the right to have a chief knight under his authority. Godfrey suddenly realized that as he opened more doors, he would ascend from being a mere prince to someone stepping closer to the absolute throne. Summon Chief Blade Knight of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 6.7. Potential 8.5. Description: an 8-foot-tall knight, a warrior above captains and anointed chief knight. He possesses monstrous strength, lightning-fast reflexes, and full control over lightning. In blackout state, the chief knight breaks the limits of his base strength and gains lightning tendril-like wings that can be used as both an offensive weapon and for flight. Godfrey was short of words, it just got better with every door. "Enter blackout," he said, and the chief knight nodded. "As you wish." As he spoke, his hood turned crimson, as did his golden armor and loincloth, while his sword became as night. From his back, tendrils made completely out of golden lightning burst forth. They were long and alive, their brightness chasing away the darkness throughout the room, illuminating even his throne. Godfrey felt the air become charged, as a low hum rippled through it. With a thought, he exited the soul's space, and with another, a diagram appeared midair from which the chief knight emerged, his lightning tendril wings crackling as a bright golden light flooded the mansion, piercing out through the doors and window frames. Tempest, Godfrey whispered, watching the chief knight in all his glory. That sounds good, I'll call you Tempest, he said aloud, prompting the knight to look down at him. I shall wear it proudly, my prince, Tempest replied solemnly. Unbeknownst to Godfrey, at the base of the hill, 4 members of a guild were rooted to the ground, staring at the angelic being hovering above the mansion like a miniature sun in the dark night. They had come because the authorities had sent word of a discovered Hymana signature, since all the gauge devices were connected to the central network for monitoring. A girl with cat ears couldn't help but gasp, "Is that a summon?" "It's an angel," a short, stocky man muttered. "If that's not a summon, then we better leave. That's clearly a powerful high tier," another said in panic, but just then Tempest vanished, allowing darkness to engulf the place once more. People in their homes, who had been staring at the night in awe, suddenly felt disgusted by the returning darkness that swallowed the mansion after the night's disappearance. "Where did it go?" the cat-eared girl asked with wary eyes. Their eyes narrowed when they saw someone in a black hood descending the hill, his hands in the pockets of his hoodie. The cat-eared girl caught a glimpse of his face and her eyes widened. "He's young. Wait, that teen owns that summon." "We should head back. There's no way a dungeon will still be here if that summoner got here first," the short man said. At noon the next day, Godfrey stood before Amazon General Hospital, the largest hospital in Amazon City, known for its exquisite design and immense size. It was also one of the most renowned hospitals on the continent and beyond. Lots of cars were parked outside, and many people walked in and out. Some ambulances drove in, rushing patients inside, but Godfrey didn't even seem to notice. It was as if he walked in his own world, his face void of a smile. He walked through the glass doors, straight to the receptionist. "I want to see my mother, she's Valentina Daniels." The receptionist looked up at the golden-haired teen with wide eyes the moment she heard that name. She had been typing on her monitor, preparing to ask her usual questions without even looking, but that name caught her off guard. "You're Dr. Valentina's son," she gasped. "Wait a moment, let me make a call." Godfrey nodded, leaning on the counter, then suddenly saw his mother walking through the corridor on the second floor, surrounded by a group of medical experts. Godfrey cupped his hands around his mouth. "Mum." His loud voice drew gazes, and it also caught his mother's attention. She couldn't mistake that voice. Valentina's eyes widened at the sight of her son, and she quickened her pace toward the escalator. Her assistant panicked. "Dr. Valentina, you have a patient." Valentina ignored her call. Even while on the escalator, she kept taking hurried steps until she reached the floor and threw her arms around Godfrey. Godfrey embraced his mother tightly, sinking his head into her neck, where he could breathe in her familiar scent. She coughed softly and his eyes gleamed. "I'm here to take you home," he said, watching the other doctors descend. Godfrey proceeded to hold his mother's hand. "You'll also be resigning from this place. You've been working here since before I was born, that's enough." Valentina was stunned to hear what Godfrey said, but the shock hit the other doctors even harder. What did you just say?" Valentina's assistant gasped. "Can't you see her face? It's pale. She's clearly down, yet she worked yesterday, and today she's still here, healing people who will find another doctor once she's dead," Godfrey yelled, veins popping on his neck as he glared at the woman. She flinched. "Young man, this is a hospital," one of the doctors said sternly. "I know, and we're just leaving," Godfrey replied curtly as he walked out, hand in hand with his mother. She didn't say a word. As they drove out in her car, Valentina turned to Godfrey, who was still fuming in silence, and smiled brightly. "Why are you smiling?" Godfrey asked, raising an eyebrow. "I needed someone to pull me out of there," she explained gently. "My little boy has grown up." She beamed, but then her eyes narrowed. "Is that why you left school?" Noticing her tone was about to change, Godfrey picked up his phone. "I'm texting Victoria. What would you like to eat? Let me inform her." Valentina scoffed. "She's quite down." "What?" Godfrey's eyes widened. Victoria was also sick. A while later, Victoria opened the door to find 2 men, one in a black suit, who was Dean, the hospital's director, and the other dressed even more sharply, in a light brown vest over a white shirt and matching pants. The sleeves were folded neatly, revealing his top-class watch, and a pair of spectacles rested on his nose. His taste for elegance was evident. He was none other than Mr. Scott, one of Amazon General Hospital's top senior doctors. Both men walked into the sitting room and sat on the long sofa facing Valentina, who sat opposite them, one leg crossed over the other. Even with her pale, sickly face, her elegance wasn't diminished in the slightest. A laptop rested on her lap. "I was preparing my resignation letter and was just about to send it," Valentina said politely. Dean, the director, cleared his throat after glancing at Mr. Scott. "Dr. Valentina, the mayor of Amazon and the branch president of Amazon's Pagoda Guild, have both expressed their wish for you to continue your service to the city and the world as a whole. Your salary will be increased, and you'll be given an honorary award." He knew that once the two most important people in the city had spoken, Valentina would have no choice but to cancel her resignation. "We can give you a break if that's what you need, but what will a highly skilled summoner like you, one who can heal damages and has maintained a zero-death rate for 17 years, gain from leaving a place like our hospital? Can't you see that everyone values what you're doing, how you save lives, all except that son of yours?" Mr. Scott said coldly. Valentina's eyes narrowed. "Do not speak of my son in such a manner," she rebuked. "You always defend him, but all he wants is to fulfill his own selfish ambitions. You love taking care of people. If he knew that, he wouldn't have made you resign," Mr. Scott said firmly. Just then, Godfrey came out, unstrapping his boxing gloves. "Still trying to beat those ahead of you with such pitiful attempts. Boxing, in an age like this, what a joke," Scott scowled inwardly. "You should leave," Godfrey said. "What?" Dean and Scott frowned deeply. "My mother needs rest. She's been working so hard that she barely has time for herself," Godfrey stated with crossed arms, standing behind his mother. "I'm sorry, but your mother can't resign. Did you know the authorities always gave you preferential treatment because of her service? Like that highly trained bodyguard, of whom there are only 10 in the city," Dean pointed at Victoria, whose face was also quite pale. "If you still persist, be prepared to leave this house. It's strictly for the government's esteemed workers," he threatened. "We'll leave," Valentina replied instantly. "Very well then," Dean rose and left with Scott. As Victoria closed the door, she began to cough violently. Godfrey approached her with concern, but before he could reach her, his mother began coughing just as hard. In a car outside Godfrey's house, Dean turned to Scott. "Is it done?" Scott nodded. "We spent enough time for it to spread." Dean sighed. "We can't help it. She's been considering another hospital outside Amazon. If we allow her to leave, Amazon will fall, we might become insignificant on the map, and wherever she goes will grow." What Scott had released was the final toxin which would make Valentina and Victoria's illness deteriorate extremely, with intense fever, pains and weaknesses at the joints, vomiting, hallucinations, and much more. This was a trait of his summon that he hid. He wasn't a healer like many others. His summon knew how to absorb pain and take away the wound, but it didn't heal them. All that pain and sickness were absorbed, refined, and used to strengthen his summon's innate skill, which was to spread undetectable and vile health issues. Mr. Scott cleared his throat. "Should I arrange the men?" "Of course," Dean replied. "We should end it all tonight before the public knows she harbored the thought of resigning." After giving his mother and Victoria their medication, Godfrey was shocked to discover that a short while later, their health state grew even worse. His mother had an intense fever, while Victoria vomited so much he began to panic. To even move them from their rooms to a different place became a huge problem, as they had difficulties moving. He couldn't understand how they both fell this ill. For 16 years, Godfrey had never seen Victoria fall ill. His mother, on the other hand, always suffered from cold in a season like this, where it rained a lot, but it had never been this bad. Once Godfrey was out of options, he went to take the car keys, and from the floor-to-ceiling window, he gazed into the night. The calm drizzle seemed to water the world, but his eyes narrowed when a black van parked beside the fence of his compound. He drew close to the window, his face turning grave as 9 men in black jumped over the wall. Watching them leap unnaturally high and land with ease, he knew these were summoners. They wore black masks with white skulls, but one of them had a crimson skull and he held a pistol. Godfrey squinted. The one with the crimson skull pulled out a curved sword, and with a horizontal swing, unleashed a crescent arc that sliced through the maze, incinerating the grass even under the drizzle. He looked at his men and they advanced toward the door. Crimson Skull pointed his gun, which had a silencer, at the door and fired, destroying the lock before slowly moving in. "I heard there 2 women and a boy," he said. "The boy shouldn't be as ill, but he should be sleeping. 2 of you go up, kill the bodyguard and—" A bright golden light made them turn to the door still left open. Out in the yard, a towering hunk of steel with a sword bigger than a man walked out, his golden eyes humming with electricity from within the darkness of his hood. The assassins suddenly felt small before this 8-foot humanoid tank who lifted his sword and pointed it at them. One of them lost control of his body. A strange force pulled him backward, right into Tempest's gauntleted hand. Tempest held the man's head, lifting him off the ground as golden lightning coursed through the assassin's body, so much that it spread on the ground, spreading through the water. The other 5 couldn't believe their eyes as Tempest casually tossed aside the lifeless man. All 5 of them released bullets, but the bullets they carried as weapons to execute their will and kill whatever stood in their way bounced off like tiny stones tossed by a child to an adult. A crimson diagram appeared beside Crimson's skull. From it, a huge drake with thick crimson scales and 1 long horn came out. Its claws glowed like they were fresh out of a volcano. This was a 6 summon with great defense and offense. Though considered a lesser member of the dragon species, it was still a renowned summon. This drake lunged at Tempest, clawing at him. Tempest blocked the strike with his greatsword. His greatsword pulsed, and the drake was shot backward by an unseen force, striking the wall. Cracks tore open across the wall, but that wasn't all. Before the drake could recover, it was suddenly pulled toward Tempest. The chief knight took 1 step and swung his sword, cleanly slicing off the head of the drake, while the body flew out of the house due to the momentum. Everyone in the room grew cold, taking steps backward as their leader bled from his orifices. "This wasn't the plan," one of them said, looking at the other. Before they could flee, golden tendrils burst out of Tempest's back as he became crimson, a frightening sight as the wings took the room from darkness to intense brightness. The wings tore through the other 4, electrocuting them until all that remained were bones that seemed to have been hundreds of years old. Like glass, one of the skulls shattered under Tempest's ironclad boot. The chief knight slowly turned to the entrance, from where he saw a man perched on top of the fence. He wasn't there before, and he had a 7-foot-tall crimson-furred werewolf standing beside him in a crouching form, ready to pounce. The man outside wore a bulletproof vest and had 1 fake eye. He jumped down, his bare foot hitting the wet ground. Gideon, the crimson werewolf summoner, looked up at the floor-to-ceiling window. It was dark up there, but he could see the teen standing right behind it. "The boy's alive, and not just that," Godfrey looked at Tempest. "He eliminated the first team." "What?" Scott replied from the other side of the phone. "Don't worry, I'll deal with the problem." He ended the call. This man was a known solo hunter ranked amongst Amazon's top, someone even the president of Pagoda Guild's branch had personally invited. Despite Scott's shock, he had no doubt Gideon, a man whose summon rose to 7 during a full moon, which this night happened to be, would fail to kill a teen who had awakened just some months ago. Did he even know what it was like to fight with your life on the line in the treacherous terrain of a dungeon? Tempest walked out of the house. Just like Mountain's great shield could reflect, his greatsword had an effect called pull and push. As simple as it sounded, it allowed Tempest to control his foe in battle. With such a weapon effect, the pace of every battle was controlled by the chief knight, making him a formidable combatant. The drizzle bounced off his pauldrons while behind him, his wings stretched back, so long that the end was still within the house. He hadn't unfurled them, or he would be in the air instead. Gideon squinted at the tendrils of pure golden lightning. They did look like wings, lined side by side like that. "Lycan, deal with the summon, I'll handle the summoner." The moment Gideon said that, bone spikes grew out of the werewolf's forearms and back. It lifted its head and howled. At that howl, thick bone spikes burst out of the floor in several rows, but before it could touch Tempest, he was already midair, his wings spread out, humming brightly as they slowly wiggled majestically with life. From Godfrey's eyes, those bone spikes, about 2 feet high, were like the fangs of an enormous beast. Had Tempest not reacted at lightning speed, he would have been badly injured and crippled. Gideon shot off the ground like he'd bounced off a trampoline, flying toward the massive window with a grin, but to his shock, Tempest appeared before him. Before Gideon could react, the chief knight grabbed his face and dived down, crashing Gideon's skull into the hard ground, opening a crater. His wings came before him, side by side, each tendril stabbing through the werewolf which had leaped to save its summoner. Respectfully, the werewolf was a powerful 7 high tier, but in blackout state, Tempest was a 7.7 high tier, and with the aid of his armor and weapons, he could effectively clash with a Lord tier. Gideon's eyes widened before they dimmed, shock still evident. Tempest rose to his feet while Godfrey walked out of the house. Just then, Gideon's phone rang and he picked it up. "Has it been taken care of?" It was Scott's voice he heard. "Yes, I've taken care of the people you sent," he said coldly. Mr. Scott scoffed. "You won't be able to walk out of this alive. By the way, did you give your mother her medication? One funny thing about that is, the more she takes those pills, the worse her sickness will get." Godfrey froze, unable to speak as his eyes widened to the limit. "I bet you want to come after me, but you can't. And don't worry, my plan B is there. They'll make sure your family reunites in the grave." Scott chuckled. Godfrey heard vehicles driving into the street. And one of them slammed the gate down and drove in. Another followed suit, while the last stayed outside. Men with masks stepped out with automatic rifles, loaded with shells that were made of a material not from Earth, thus creating bullets that could pierce through the tough exterior of a summon. Tempest stood before Godfrey, whose eyes had reddened with rage. The men unleashed fire, not the one-shots of pistols, but a rain of bullets, yet Tempest moved his sword at such speed it almost left afterimages. He deflected the bullets until the men ran out. "What's this thing?" one of them gasped, trying to reload. Just then, Tempest unleashed an intense light, blinding them. In that moment, his wings propelled him into their midst. Those in the third vehicle couldn't believe their eyes as Tempest moved through the ranks of these men and their summons, leaving corpses in his wake. If he slammed into you, it was death. If he used his greatsword, it was death. Should his wings touch you, it was death. The driver quickly held the steering, about to move the vehicle backward, but a diagram flared above and a golden knight crashed onto the vehicle. It caved inward, but the driver expertly increased his speed, and Mountain rolled off. The man slammed the accelerator, lurching the vehicle toward Mountain with great speed. Mountain activated blackout state, lifted his leg, and Spartan kicked the van, destroying the hood as it was thrown backward, crashing into a fence. The soft clinks of steel on the asphalt road made Mountain turn toward the 8-foot-tall chief, whose wings illuminated the horrifying sight of sliced cars and littered corpses behind. Tempest stood beside Mountain, glanced at the vehicle he'd kicked back for a while, and gave a soft nod. In a luxurious sitting room, a woman in her late 40s, the mayor of Amazon City, reclined on a sofa, exhaling heavily as she had just returned from an important event. "Get me a glass of water," she said with an exhausted tone. Her phone suddenly rang. Lifting an eyebrow at who could be calling her direct line this late, she picked up her phone. Hard lines appeared on her temples as it was an unknown number. Upon picking the call, a woman's voice rang. "I want you to check up on a boy for me." The mayor's eyes narrowed. Who in the world would call her, the mayor of a city, with an unknown line and ask her to check up on a boy? When had she become a servant? "Who is this?" she asked. "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Christy Pendragon." The moment the mayor heard the name, her soul quivered. Christy Pendragon, the wife of a leader of one of the top families in the world. The Pendragon was a family that owned a Blue Gate dungeon much bigger than Amazon City as their home. "Which boy, I will go check on him myself," the mayor declared, ensuring her voice was as soft as possible. "You don't have to," Christy's voice came from the other side. "You may send someone. The boy's name is Godfrey Daniels. Please get back to me once you make sure he's fine." The mayor's face paled. What if he wasn't fine? That was a question she couldn't bring herself to ask. Pulling herself out of shock, the mayor quickly called Dean. The moment he picked up the call, she rose to her feet. "Stop the attack. Make sure neither the boy nor the rest of his family is hurt, by all means," she ordered fiercely. "The plans should already be done by now," Dean replied. The mayor grew pale. "The Pendragons are asking for him and his family. How do you explain to them that you killed him without having a dragon in our clouds?" "What?" Dean's eyes narrowed when he heard the mayor say that. He swiftly dialed Scott's number, sweat beads appearing on his temples. Meanwhile, Mr. Scott sat in his house, facing the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of wine in his right hand. He leaned comfortably on a sofa, crossing one leg over the other. The senior doctor had sent his summon to the scene. Currently, he could see through the eyes of a pale white bat soaring above skyscrapers. It had luminous blue eyes and one short blue horn. Just a mile or two and I'll be there. My toxins should put that brash kid in his place. Still, I need to see how he has been neutralizing my men. Does he have people with him? Scott whispered when he suddenly noticed a golden object in the air. In one moment it was a distance away. In the next, the projectile was close. It was a huge arrow, longer than when an adult stretches out both his arms in opposite directions. And this massive, ballistic-sized arrow crackled intensely with lightning, making it seem like a meteor. Before Scott could think, the arrow pierced through the soft, leathery skin of his bat and came out from the back of its chest as golden lightning scorched the creature's insides. It screeched loudly, a final cry, before crashing on the top of a skyscraper. On the other side, blood came out from Scott's nose and mouth as his eyes widened to the core with disbelief. What was that? Was it him? I was over a mile away and several feet in the air. Just how? His phone rang as his consciousness waned. Scott picked the phone, struggling to place it against his ear as he saw the caller was the director. Scott, have you attacked them? Scott, answer me. Dean's voice roared from the speakers of the phone. Run, Dean. He's a monster. Scott fainted before he could say more. Scott, Scott, Dean yelled from the other side, a sudden cold enveloping him. Dean and the mayor entered a brightly lit hospital, White Gate Hospital, its name glowing above the several-story building. It was way past midnight, as the time was clocking towards 2:00 a.m., and the lobby of this large hospital was currently void of people, all except the receptionists and the boy in a singlet leaning down, his face toward the floor. He sat on the waiting chairs, but the moment Dean and the mayor walked in with some bodyguards, their footsteps made Godfrey lift up his head. Is that him? The mayor asked. The director nodded, his eyes narrowing as Godfrey rose to his feet and began to approach them with large strides. He walked with his bare feet, a sign that he wasn't even able to dress properly, and his top had been vomited on, so he had to remove it. Seeing Godfrey's aggressiveness, the head security frowned. Constrain him. At his orders, 2 bodyguards in suits dashed out. Godfrey closed in with 2 quick steps, almost like a run, leaping and grabbing both bodyguards by the face at a speed they couldn't react to, launching them like toys out of the building. They flew right past the mayor and the director, shattering the hospital's glass door and crashing into the vehicles outside. The absurd strength made the director's heart pound. He suddenly remembered seeing Godfrey come out with boxing gloves. Only God knew what would happen to his face if Godfrey punched him. His fears became valid as golden lightning crackled throughout Godfrey's right arm, his knuckles humming as his eyes, distorted in pain and rage, gleamed. The head security activated item manipulation, forming a translucent shield right before Godfrey. His fist connected with the dome, and instantly cracks spread out as it exploded. The head security's eyes went wide. To be able to break his defensive skill with just one blow, Godfrey needed to be as strong as a high tier. What this meant was that he faced a dual summoner whose summons were at least 2 high tiers. He couldn't believe there was such a talent in Amazon City and no one knew about it. In that millisecond, he saw Godfrey's left crackling with the same amount of lightning. He could see the boy's mana was low and fluctuating, like a candle about to be snuffed out, but even that little could do devastating damage, as he was talking about the blow of a high tier. Such a blow could shatter the hood of an armored vehicle. Neither the mayor nor the director would live to see another minute if he did nothing. A diagram manifested, and a huge 9-foot-tall stalk emerged, grabbing Godfrey's fist and stopping the blow with 1 foot. This was the Iron Gale stalk, a rare, top-level high-tier summon with great intelligence and an innate skill to form its own martial technique as it grew older through experience. Its golden slender legs gleamed like pure gold. The talons of its foot threatened to destroy Godfrey's hand completely if he thought of making another move. It is enough, the head security bellowed, but inwardly he wondered what they had done to make him sink so deep into such state. He was fully aware Godfrey was beyond the point of listening, so there was no other choice than to subdue him. However, that bold thought crumbled as 3 diagrams flared behind Godfrey. They released 3 towering golden knights. Tempest stood in the middle, the tip of his massive greatsword placed against the floor as he rested his gauntleted hands on the pommel of the long hilt. Mountain stood at his left, Achilles' shield raised a bit up for movement while the longsword was positioned beside it. Clearly, the bulky knight was ready to move. At the right, Ballista had already drawn his bow fully, the tip gleaming under the ceiling light. Great God, the head security gasped with trembling eyes, as before him stood a tri-summoner. An absolute legend, as they stood above dual summoners, the same way dual summoners had the advantage over a summoner with just one summon. The mayor was even more stunned than the head security. She couldn't believe a tri-summoner was in her city. Him alone could represent Amazon, and every great deed he did would only make the city even more prosperous. It would become a city of legacy. Dean, however, paled. The mayor clenched her teeth. So this is the reason the Pendragons have eyes on him. They want to steal my treasure right from under my nose. Instantaneously, she composed herself before a fight would erupt. Godfrey, that's your name, right? I was unaware of all this, and I came to tell you that Amazon General Hospital is currently under surveillance, and their director with his accomplice, Mr. Scott, will rot in jail for attempting to kill your mother, who had served the city for almost 2 decades. What? The director was shocked, but the iron gale stalk slammed him to the ground, pinning one foot on his head. The cold gleam of its long talons made Dean quiver. With the last thread of mana gone, Godfrey's summons were pulled back to the soul space, but he remained standing despite exhaustion clawing at his every thought. Clearing her throat with a wide, friendly smile, the mayor continued, I will make sure there's a hospital built in honor of what your parents have done for this city, and your mother will be in charge of this hospital. A statue of honor greater than the one that was built before will be made in honor of your father. All this will begin as of today. Godfrey squinted. The mayor wasn't really aware. Was that true? Well, he didn't see her at his house, and she came by this time of the day. Was that out of her good heart toward his family? Was the destruction of his father's statue, so they could build a new one all along? If you attended our school, you can always be close to your mother, and nothing of this sort would repeat itself. That's a lie. She knew about our plans to kill your mother. She'll always lean toward the side that gives the advantage. That's why your father's statue is being replaced by that of the Pagoda Guild. He pushed. Dean bellowed. He didn't care if the mayor would release him from prison later, because the moment he went there, he had lost his position and might never regain it. It was best they both fell. The mayor's eyes widened. Even the head security was shocked. All of a sudden, a voice rang. You think you can take my student with your lies? Sebastian walked into the hospital. During the time it took Godfrey to get to the hospital, he had called his school, and Edwin had teleported the headmaster to Amazon City. Seeing him approach, Godfrey couldn't believe his eyes. Behind him was his secretary, Evangeline. Who are you? The mayor frowned. Since when did people grow the guts to speak to her in such a manner? Sebastian smiled faintly. I am the headmaster of Manhattan's Summoners High, Sebastian. The mayor's heart shook. Before her was one of the Invincibles. Invincibles were Lord Tiers with distinct summons that made them a huge threat to King Tiers and invincible to those below them. There were only a few in the world, and before her stood one of them. Seen what you and your accomplices have done to my student's home. Sebastian's eyes grew cold as he stared at Dean and the mayor. Godfrey has informed me how his mother's health came to this state. These are crimes, and they have punishments such as banishment to death zones or imprisonment, which would take a few decades off you. The mayor's expression became ugly. I almost forgot to ask, has such a talented humanoid summoner gone through readjustment class, because it doesn't look like it? Sebastian's eyes narrowed. He knew very well the mayor was ready to push this threat in order to free herself. Very well then, Sebastian snapped his fingers. Instantly, the mayor and the director vanished, and she found herself in her house, walking toward her vehicle. This was just after Christy Pendragon's call and Dean's response. Midway to the car, she froze. Did she sleep off? That call was during the hours of 9 p.m., but this was almost 2:30 a.m. in the morning. While the same thing happened to Dean, Sebastian approached Godfrey. Prepare, we'll be leaving Manhattan this morning, you and your mother. Godfrey sat on a sofa, watching the news with rapt attention. The news anchor was speaking about the Amazon mayor who was arrested, and seeing the highlighted video of her unconsciously muttering, "How did you know?" to the officers that came to her house made Godfrey scowl. Her terrified face was the photo used on the screen, as the news anchor announced that, on the account of her crime against the pillar of Amazon City, who had diligently served for 2 decades, she, Dean, and Mr. Scott were sentenced a few hours ago to banishment. Apparently, they were to be banished to the Dead Desert, a region in a Blue Gate dungeon where not one single creature survives. There wasn't an oasis, and the heat of the sun was said to be too hot for life to thrive. They were literally sent to starve and burn to death. A smile crossed Godfrey's face at that judgment. I don't think anyone would try to kill your mother with a punishment like that on the line. Godfrey turned to the speaker, his eyes landing on Victoria, who walked to the dining, arranging their breakfast. As she set the food, his mother walked out of the kitchen in an apron. How many times am I going to tell you to leave the sitting room? I'm the one doing the cooking today, and you're more interested in the screen. Godfrey rose up, a warm smile spreading across his face, as he watched both women looking radiant as the sun shone through the window behind them. It's just been 2 days. How many times will I tell you to rest? Stop being paranoid, we are fine. Now come and eat, I prepared your favorite, Valentina replied, while Victoria took a bite of Godfrey's bacon, prompting the teen to take his plate further away from her reach with a glare. As they sat down for breakfast, Godfrey glanced at his mother. Manhattan has good hospitals, you can work in one of them. Valentina chuckled. Sounds like a good idea, but I want to enjoy this peace and quiet for a while. I have forgotten how serene it used to be when your father was alive. Also, working without end has drained me of my mana. I need to start storing from the start. It would allow me to bond with my summon. It's like we haven't grown since I haven't allowed him to enjoy nature like I once did, Valentina added. Right after calm breakfast and some rest, Godfrey found himself in the training room, facing off against Victoria. It's been a while since we trained like this. Ever since you awakened, you must have neglected your boxing skills. Tusk, I missed that kid who had a drive. While Victoria was at ease, Godfrey wore a solemn expression, sweat beads already gathering on his temples. He had never won a fight against her. And what Dean said about Victoria being one of the few top-class bodyguards was a valid response as to why she was unbeatable. If there were only 10 of her kind, then she was definitely above professionals. Watching her flash from left to right with such flawless footwork made his heart pound. Nothing to say, well, here I come, Victoria announced as she blurred forward, throwing 6 swift punches in one go, but to her amazement, Godfrey narrowly evaded all 6. She was certain Godfrey could not dodge it. Even if he managed one, definitely not all. Such a blow required defense as a counter, but Godfrey's reflexes were suddenly so outrageous that he dodged all 6 of her blows. She was trained to become the predator of summoners, an alpha bodyguard. When it came to hand-to-hand combat skills and the modified boxing technique, she was considered the best of her bunch. Godfrey's physical capabilities could now match a 6.5 high tier, yet even then, Victoria was certain such reflexes were beyond normal. It had to be Echo. And she wasn't wrong. Tapping into Tempest's lightning-fast reflexes made Godfrey able to react to anything even before his mind processed it. Victoria launched a sweeping kick, to which Godfrey ducked. She followed with a punch, but he leaped back, steadied himself, and pushed through at that moment, throwing a straight, fast punch. It stopped right before the tip of her nose. Her hair fluttered due to the wind. Good, you're definitely beyond your former self. Let's see what you can do when I also activate an echo of my own. Victoria's eyes gleamed. She blurred before Godfrey could think. Her fist was inches away from his cheek, but his head leaned away, yet his skin hurt as her fist flew past. Loud sounds echoed from the training room, followed by some quaking and rumbling that grew so intense, Valentina rushed from the upper floor, afraid of the building collapsing. As the elevator that led underground opened, her eyes widened at the sight of web-like cracks created by fists on the solid cement wall. Some pillars had been chewed off by blows and kicks. She could even see imprints of their feet on the hard floor. The room, made to contain such intense fights, was on the verge of falling apart, and the culprits were frozen in a fight stance. Victoria's leg was almost kissing Godfrey's head, but he blocked with one hand, throwing a blow that was inches away from her own forearm, which she raised up to block her head. I said I want peace and quiet. Godfrey, you are leaving for school tomorrow morning. The next morning at Manhattan High, a good number of students watched the intense fight going on in the sophomore classroom. It was Dale and Orwin against Cecil, Siegfried and Maldred. Dale slammed Cecil into a desk with a grunt while she hit him with her knee. He took some steps back. Siegfried held his neck in a chokehold from behind, while Orwin and Maldred clashed at another corner. I have had enough of you, Dale bellowed, his eyes fixed on Cecil as he lifted Siegfried and slammed him on the ground. Cecil launched a kick, but Dale braced it, head bashing her. She fell backward but held herself after some steps, but it was clear handling Dale on her own without a mana suppressor proved tough. Dale's finally snapped. I mean, his beef with Cecil has been growing in the dark all this time. We all knew it would come to this, a bystander said. Isolde, who sat at the back of the class, pulled off her earbuds with a frown while Snow watched with crossed arms and narrowed eyes. Are they not afraid of Manhattan's queen? A freshman watching from the window asked. Isolde isn't Manhattan's queen anymore. Lilith now holds the title. She's also left Nexus Club and is currently at odds with them. What? My God, he's here. A girl beside them held her mouth. The boys talking turned, their eyes widening as they watched the golden-haired sophomore walk through the corridor. The gasp spread through the corridor. The moment Godfrey appeared at the door, the fight ceased as his presence swept throughout the room. Has he grown bigger? Dale's eyes narrowed as he realized Godfrey was physically the same, but the aura he radiated had undergone a major shift, his whole being radiated authority. He had returned different, and everyone could see it. Godfrey's eyes went straight to Snow, who by instinct raised his guard, as he could feel himself grow small at just a mere glance from Godfrey. He felt heavily threatened, and this wasn't because Godfrey glared or had a furious expression. It was his summon and mind telling him that he was face to face with danger. That glance had a statement, weren't you supposed to be in charge? The king was back, and he was found lacking in his duties. The realization that he felt this way toward Godfrey pierced his pride like a sharp knife. At Godfrey's glance, the fighters went to their seats in silence as he walked straight to his seat. Godfrey's new haircut makes him look more masculine, doesn't he look S? The girl shut her mouth when Lucy covered it with her hand as Godfrey glanced in their direction. What they didn't know was that while he took out a book from his bag, he also shot Isolde a glance from the corner of his eyes while pretending to scan the entire room. He could see her pretending to read her book, but also shooting side glances at him. At least his own was more secretive. When it seemed like he wanted to look in her direction, she would look away, and when it seemed their eyes wanted to meet, Godfrey would calmly turn as if he didn't even notice. Both sides were waiting for who would take the first step since, considering the way he left and the information he got later about her mother's call, Godfrey felt a little bad. So he proceeded to sit tight, opening one page after the other while rummaging for an idea through his mind. Everyone in the class was perplexed. Even those standing outside couldn't understand the tense silence in the classroom, just the sound of paper being flipped. After looking at Godfrey for a while, Isolde's chair scraped the floor, sliding backward as she rose to her feet, walked to his desk, sat on it, took his book and closed it, allowing his eyes to meet her glare. Godfrey smiled innocently, prompting her to fume even more. Call an ugly boy pretty for a while, and he actually acts like he's some Prince Charming. She scowled. Wah, Godfrey couldn't even counter when she flicked her finger at his nose. I noticed your haircut makes your face even more pretty. It was Godfrey's turn to scoff, but inside, he bubbled. He cleared his throat like he wasn't fazed by her compliment. The headmaster told me your mother called him after she called the mayor. Do you know who can get Christy Pendragon to be making calls about someone she's never met? He said softly. Isolde became flustered. She never expected Godfrey to know. Inside, she already accused her mother of betraying her. Thank you, Godfrey said warmly. Isolde's cheeks flushed as she turned away only to lock eyes with Edwin. Godfrey saw him at the same time. The man stood on the lectern, watching them with an incredulous look. Do you two need a room? Isolde scurried to her chair while the rest of the class laughed at their plight. Finally, you're back, Edwin said, staring straight at Godfrey, who was confused, as it seemed like Edwin had been praying for him to return. We're in sports week. There's a gridiron football match going on, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. The main goal is to pick out talents for the varsity junior team. Snow, Sale, and Siegfried are the class's best talents, but they're not enough to beat the juniors. Godfrey blinked as Edwin continued briefing him with the intense gaze of a coach, forcing him to accept what he didn't even sign up for. We've beaten the freshmen and will be facing off against the upperclassmen. Would you like to participate? Everyone looked at Godfrey, who kept an uncomfortable silence for a while before sighing. I can't play gridiron football. Edwin squinted. What do you mean? I haven't really played it before, I've only watched. Edwin's soul went cold. Shock swept through the classroom. Godfrey can't play football, one of his classmates muttered with a dismayed expression. Meanwhile, Godfrey had never seen such disappointment on Edwin's face before. It can't be helped, Edwin clapped loudly, his eyes sharp. We have a week to train you, making you a running back will be best. Snow frowned, we can't afford a rookie to mess up the game. He's not even a rookie, Siegfried added. Test him and figure out how to utilize him. Godfrey is physically the strongest male in this class, he's equally fast, and none of you can take him down even if you gang up together. If he can pick up one or two things and know the rules, he's good to go. What? Who learns gridiron in a week? He'll doom us, Dale countered. While the others fought against Edwin with their words, Isolde was amused at Godfrey's innocent expression. It made her look forward to seeing him step into this unknown terrain. We're facing the king and his team, yet our hope is a complete rookie who might have never held a ball in his life. A sophomore collapsed on his desk due to Edwin's adamant stand. Later on at the field were lots of students, few of them watching the handsome, well-built numbered members of Nexus Club practice on the beautiful green field. Most of them were staring at the cheerleaders who wore long-sleeved tops, high-waisted pleated skirts, and long socks. Among them was a brown-skinned girl whose skin was glossy, with braids on her head that ended with two curly light purple strands, one of the top 5 beauties in Manhattan. She was Rowana, a third-year student. Beside her was Usable, a black-haired third-year, also one of the top 5, and both of them stood behind Lilith, now known as the school belle, as she held the position of #1 most beautiful girl in school. This position was due to her title as Manhattan Queen. Isolde was pushed to second place after losing it. Isn't that Godfrey? Rowana raised an eyebrow as she turned the eyes of the other 2 girls to the group of sophomore boys walking into the field with a golden-haired boy in a football training outfit. His eyes wandered around. Clearly, this was a new experience for him. Lilith chuckled. A little bird told me he has never played football before. Usable crossed her arms. What's he doing here then? Isn't it obvious? Lilith rolled her eyes. To make a fool of himself. She scoffed, taking some strands of her red hair behind her ear. Tusk, Siegfried clicked his tongue. All the girls in the top 5 beauty rankings are cheerleaders for John and his team. What do you guys think about Isolde cheerleading for us? He turned, but his eyes trembled at Godfrey's glare. He swiftly realized that while they all towered over Godfrey like giants when it came to this sport, he was still terrifying when it came to actual strength. And from what he felt, Godfrey might not be the same as the one that left 4 days ago. Sweat trickled down his forehead, as Godfrey seemed to take a pretty deep offense. Just then, Snow slammed the helm into Godfrey's abdomen, and his attention went away from Siegfried to the helmet. Wear it, we need to see what you can do, Snow said as he took a ball. Siegfried, Dale, and the others wore their helms. On the other end of the field, John stopped, looking at the sophomores with a placid face. His eyes went to Isolde, who sat amongst the sparse crowd, watching them. Around him were Yuan, Edric, and the hounds, all of whom paused and fastened their eyes on the other end of the field. Wow, Ulrich, the eldest of the triplets, clapped with a wide smile when he saw Godfrey. I was afraid he was so scared he quit school. That would have been boring, Leofric the last, said with a predatory grin. Yuan turned his head toward John. Lilith got information that they planned to use him, but he has never played gridiron before, probably because he never awakened earlier. John remained silent. I hope he plays though. I can bash his head in for splitting John and Isolde, Edric said, stretching his arms. John's eyes went from Isolde to Percival. There's no need for all that. Someone who can't play gridiron isn't worth our attention in this game. Keep to the plan, the sophomores will not score any points. That won't be a problem, Yuan replied. Will Percival join us? John looked at Percival. When I want it, he will. Just then, Snow tossed the ball, sending it spiraling beautifully through the air while Godfrey raced to position himself. The moment he caught it, Siegfried slammed him to the ground. Don't let any part of your body touch the floor except your hands and feet. Watch out for defenders, Snow yelled as he took another ball. I'm pretty sure he's making me play as a wide receiver, Godfrey thought and dashed after the second ball, leaping high and grabbing it before it entered the end zone, but was rammed by Dale and sent crashing several times on the field. Is he being beaten up in the name of practice? Usable asked with slight disbelief. This is hopeless, Rowana said, with a little concern for Godfrey after seeing him get tackled the 3rd time by Dale and Siegfried. Orwin slapped his forehead. We should just pull him out. Everyone is watching us make fun of ourselves. It's just the first day, and he'll learn how to catch under the most difficult circumstances, Snow snapped. I trust Snow, Now that he has the chance, he'll tear Godfrey part by part until he's utterly humiliated. Lilith chuckled with crossed arms as she watched the scene. Godfrey sat on his bed in the evening hours, rubbing his sore neck when he heard a knock at the door. Instead of going towards it, he remained seated and asked, "Who?" "It's Snow." Godfrey opened the door with a slight frown. "What?" "The field is empty. It's time for us to start our real training. We have a week, but your real training will be at night," Snow said. "Then what have we been doing the entire day?" "Deceiving others. We're training you for one purpose only. Everyone will grab onto that quickly if we do it before their very eyes. The entire team is waiting." For an entire week, Godfrey trained like his life depended on it. In the day and the night he trained, he studied. He watched videos, anything and everything that could give him a good yet basic foundation. Every hour was utilized. Sleep was timed. The others were stunned that he still hadn't given up. None of them knew he had gone through worse. Now his body was extremely durable. He could run the field several times and just pant, but back when he was just an ordinary human, he could face punches from Victoria to no end. He also had to ignore his mother's pleading to stop. He was fragile but kept training until common, low-tier summoners weren't a threat anymore. Tenacity was a trait he didn't lack in the slightest. A week later and the day for the match came. Inside the grand locker room, well furnished with good lighting and lockers, all 11 students dressed up. They wore blue tops and white football pants. After gearing up, they all gathered around Snow. "Keep your eyes on Godfrey. Protect him when he's with the ball or pass if he's in the clear. For as long as he's usable, aid him. He might not last long." "What if he messes up on the first attempt?" Dale asked. "We abandon Plan A and focus on Plan B," Snow replied. As they strode toward the exit, they met the upperclassmen lined up vertically. The triplets smiled at Godfrey like they were amused, staring at a kitten. Others simply shook Snow, Dale, and Siegfried's hands before leaving for the field with their king. The moment Godfrey came out, he was introduced to an atmosphere booming with the roars and cheers of the students. The cheerleaders performed as they entered the field. John's name was echoing from the lips of many, some even raising up boards with his name and picture. Some other numbered were called, but on the sophomore side, it was only Snow. "John is just stupidly handsome with those charming red eyes of his," Usable exclaimed as Snow wore his helmet. Lilith smiled proudly. Standing beside Edwin was Gregory, the teacher representing the juniors. He was a tall, grey-haired man whose hair was tied into a ponytail. He stood beside Edwin with his arms crossed. "I never thought you'd be so desperate that you'd use a rookie as your trump card." Edwin frowned at that comment. "Just what are you planning?" Gregory gestured to a junior in white top and pants like the rest of the juniors, but his absurd size made him look like a mini giant. He was 205 cm tall with a bulging muscular build. Despite being just 17, his size would make it hard for many to believe. He was known as Tank, number 10 in the Nexus Club. "I prepared Tank for him. A nice gift, wouldn't you say?" Gregory chuckled softly while Edwin's face changed at that. On a closer look, he discovered Tank was secretly eyeing Godfrey while pretending his attention was on Dale. Just in case, Gregory patted Edwin's shoulder. "Let's have a good game," he added with a confident smile. His class was a star class. The sophomore's best talent was Snow, who was just a mid-level high tier, nothing compared to talents like Percival, Yuan, and John. Apart from these abnormal talents, Lilith, Edric, and the triplets were also stronger than Snow, so the successes of the Nexus Club were bound to be weaker. At least that was until Isolde showed up. After flipping a coin, the juniors won, so the football was placed vertically on the field for the sophomores to start the kickoff. As the rules of gridiron demanded, the loser would kick the ball to the other side, and Snow was the kicker. With a powerful force, he blasted the ball into the air. The inhuman force sent it high before it dipped down, leaving ripples like it tore through clouds. All the sophomores accelerated through the field, Siegfried, Dale, and Maldred, surpassing the others in speed. John was the one who caught the ball, and he, along with his own team, came charging. The juniors blocked whoever tried to attack John, while the sophomores tried with all their might to get him down, but he was too fast. Dale was shocked when John leaped above him with his legs wide, tapped his helm, landed behind him, and had already left him in the dust before he could turn. With ease, John ran straight to the other end of the field called the end zone, scoring 6 points for the junior team. The crowd went wild. Did he just stand there while his teammates struggled to get the ball? Usable raised an eyebrow in disbelief at Godfrey, who looked lost on the field. But Lilith struggled but couldn't hold back her laughter in the end. After scoring a touchdown of 6 points, the juniors were granted the opportunity to either make one extra point by kicking the ball for the goalpost or try another run. They chose the first. Yuan, the Asian junior famously known as number 2 and John's Knight, kicked the ball with such force that the air exploded. The ball went forth like a rocket, flying past the posts over the crossbar in a blur. 7 points to 0, Lilith screamed, waving the pom-poms in her hands. Many were attracted to her beauty. The morale of the juniors was high as they bounced on the field magnetically. A junior kicked the ball over to the sophomore side since their turn was over. Orwin grabbed the ball, passing it to Snow, who went dashing. Some sophomores ran after him, hitting juniors who came for him, but when they met the triplets, Snow's blockers were slammed to the ground. He was soon surrounded, but he threw the ball laterally before being rammed to the grass. Dale leaped for the ball but was pushed aside. The ball fell on the field, and players from both sides scrambled for it, slamming and hitting themselves until Maldred wiggled out with the ball. Since they still had the ball, they still held possession, so they had a scrimmage. The sophomores lined up their offensive players against the juniors' defenders. Amongst them were the Hounds and Yuan. They stared at each other through the visors of their helmets, breathing heavily. Maldred tossed the ball from behind his legs to Snow, who was the quarterback. The moment he did, the junior defenders came rushing for it, but the sophomores' offense collided with them. Their aim was to protect Snow until he made a pass. The field tore up under the inhuman strength the students possessed, but it was quickly reverted to its pristine form. Meanwhile, as some junior defenders like Yuan broke through the blockage, heading for Snow, he made a lateral pass to Godfrey. Godfrey caught the ball awkwardly, and everyone's eyes widened. Godfrey, Dale bellowed, beckoning for him to pass the ball. He couldn't trust Godfrey if he almost let go of the ball on his first pass. On the other hand, Godfrey's heart pounded against his chest. It was heavy, so loud that his entire body synchronized with it. Dale's call made some juniors lean toward him. Most of them felt the ball wouldn't be with Godfrey for long after that awkward catch. To their shock, Godfrey shot forward, breezing past some defenders. They dived but kissed the grass. Gregory turned to Edwin and smiled. "This is my win." Edwin furrowed his brows as he watched Tank charge toward Godfrey like a behemoth. Tank came with his shoulders. A bash would send Godfrey flying, but in that split second, Godfrey front-flipped over the 2-meter-tall upperclassman, to the shock of the juniors on the field. "What the?" Usable's eyes widened, while Isolde batted her eyelashes in pure disbelief at the confidence he had to do that. A single mistake could make everyone hate him, but Godfrey wasn't done. As if switching to a higher gear, his speed went up another notch after the flip. It almost felt like his feet weren't even touching the field. "Catch him," Edric bellowed as defender after defender fell trying to stop him. He would spin like a Beyblade against those before him, weakening their grip, and before they could regain their footing, he was gone. "My God," Rowana covered her mouth as Godfrey dashed across the field, scoring a touchdown. It was now juniors 7 and sophomores 6. Isolde felt warm seeing Godfrey smile so brightly as he jogged to meet his teammates, while the juniors stared in disbelief. She couldn't believe this was Godfrey. She once had a nightmare back when she was very young, not even 10, and it was Godfrey that was the nightmare. She feared him back then, feared to live because of his dreadful face, but with time, with more visions, especially of a younger him, she couldn't wait to fall asleep to see more, but that's when it stopped. The Godfrey she saw in her first vision, and the one smiling brightly while receiving praise from his teammates, seemed like they were from two different worlds. One was like a hellish, unforgiving sun, and the other a radiant, warm one. Isolde rose to her feet, screaming at the top of her lungs. She waved as Godfrey pulled his helmet, waving it back at her. The juniors hid their faces from John's glare. Their teacher, Gregory, frowned when he saw the sophomores aim for 2 extra points by choosing another run. They lined up for a scrimmage once more, but the faces of the juniors were more solemn, their eyes sharp. Fortunately, the sophomores weren't backing down either. The moment Orwin snapped the ball to the quarterback, who was Snow, chaos erupted. Both sides collided like twin stampedes, and Snow, without hesitation, tossed the ball to Godfrey again. This time around, Godfrey's catch was firm, and he shot forward, boiling within with fervor. "This is foolish. They're basically repeating the same thing and expecting it to work." Gregory scowled, watching with a faint smile as Ulrich, Wulfric, and Leofric, the triplets, sprinted toward Godfrey with daunting speed. Seeing that Godfrey kept gaining on them despite the other defenders he faced, the triplets came closer and fused into their eldest brother, Ulrich. Their outfits stretched and expanded, but it had already been made to accommodate such. They grew big, their combined height reaching 9 feet. It was a wonder what kind of summon created his gear, because none of it went out of place, only the other two lost theirs. The earth tore open with each powerful step they took, moving through the field like a dart. Siegfried, who acted as a blocker for Godfrey, felt an ominous sensation from behind and looked. A monstrous giant was already behind him. Siegfried transformed his skin to jade as he was slapped with the back of the hound's right hand. That slap flung Siegfried across the field. From the left end, Godfrey ran over the right end and into the audience. It was a devastating slap that made everyone shiver. Even Siegfried's helmet broke. "Drop the ball," Snow said inwardly, as those following Godfrey to aid him had all been cut off or brought down. Godfrey was moving alone into the enemy's territory. Seeing the defenders multiplying around him, Godfrey's eyes became golden, crackling with lightning for a split second before he suddenly leaned left, dodging a grab, slid with his feet and one hand supporting him, narrowly evading another who dived and continued his run. His reflexes made him move like a blur, able to react before his mind could process the thought. The hound dived, aiming for his legs, and without looking back, Godfrey leaped. The triplets' helmet kissed the grass as they slid on it while Godfrey ran through the others. Another touchdown, those supporting them went wild. Their points had risen from 6 to 8. For someone who had trained for just a week, he's incredible. Rowanna's comment earned her a terrible glare from Lilith. With their possession completed, Dale kicked off the ball to the other team. As the ball soared midair, the sophomores went after it. Edric caught the ball and began to run. He charged right through Maldred, sending the sophomore crashing to the ground. A swift lateral pass sent the ball into a junior, who sent it to John. The moment John held the ball, his demeanor changed, and he blasted forth with great speed. His knight Yuan ran following him. He sighted Dale and slammed him to the ground. To Yuan's surprise, Siegfried, who should have been injured, was racing for John. He had timed that Yuan would be slowed down by Dale so he could take the advantage. Unfortunately, Siegfried was sorely mistaken. Yuan moved on all fours like a wolf, his feet and hands alone touching the ground. In just 2 bursts, he crashed into Siegfried, paving a free path for John. Snow dived at John, but the Manhattan King flipped over him, continuing his beautiful run with many chanting his name. The only student between him and the end zone was Godfrey. Godfrey watched John, trying to predict where he would go, but soon realized the king was coming straight for him. His eyes narrowed. At that moment they clashed. John slammed one hand into Godfrey's chest, all the force from his run channeling into the clash, yet to his surprise, Godfrey skidded backward, the earth tearing open, but he stopped before the end zone. Seeing this, John dematerialized into smoke, moved past Godfrey and materialized behind him, right in the end zone, scoring a touchdown. John pushed him with just one hand. A freshman's eyes widened. While running back, John pointed at the sophomores. "We're doing what they did. We're going for the extra 2 points." They gathered. This time they were on the offense, and the sophomores were the defenders. The moment the ball was snapped to Edric, he went back and launched it across the field into John's grasp. Snow, who had seen it coming along with some others, raced for him, but without looking, John backflipped over them, spinning mid-flip so he could land right in the end zone. And he did. A faint smile graced his face as their score increased to 15, but to Snow's amazement, he spotted Godfrey standing in one spot. He didn't even try to block him. Had he given up after that first collision? That didn't sound like the defiant Godfrey he knew. That golden-haired sophomore would rather fight the entire government if he believed he was in the right. That was how tough his head was, and John had seen a glimpse of it at the party. The kickoff would give the ball back to the sophomores, but he had made plans for Godfrey. "We're good, but I don't think our class stands a chance against John. He's flawless," Lucy said to Isolde. Isolde's eyes narrowed. "I can't deny your trump card was slightly effective, but winning this match would be a dream, Edwin," Gregory said with crossed arms, his conviction in his class unwavering. The ball was once more kicked towards the sophomores, and the student who caught it was Godfrey, standing on both feet with one hand raised. The ball, with all its force, lost its power before that iron clamp disguised as human hands. He lowered himself and blasted forward. "Don't let him cross." Juniors gathered. Some were slammed off by sophomores, but lots of them, almost like they were expecting Godfrey, clamored to bring him down. The triplets once again merged together, but Godfrey leaped, spiraling horizontally like a bullet over the fused triplets and two other defenders. "There's no way he can land on both feet." Those words Lilith said barely registered in the minds of the hearers as Godfrey landed on his feet. His body went low and his knees bent, but he didn't fall. He blasted forward and slammed into Edric with a thunderous crack, launching the junior 2 meters into the air. Gasps echoed across the field. Lilith blinked several times, unable to believe that it was Edric. Since Godfrey scored a touchdown, the points rose from 8 to 14. Meanwhile, Edric slammed his helmet on the grass, glaring at Godfrey, who barely spared him a glance. Snow found himself clapping softly as Godfrey was jumped over by the others. Now that their points had risen to 14, just 1 point below the upperclassmen, the sophomores aimed for another run to gain 2 extra points. Should they succeed, they would surpass the juniors by 1 point. As they all gathered for a scrimmage, the ball was snapped to Snow, who quickly fell back as chaos ensued. The juniors were more brutal this time, with the triplets, Tank, and others barreling through those blocking them and charging towards Snow. Snow nodded at Godfrey but twisted his waist and tossed the ball to Siegfried, who was currently in the clear. Siegfried danced through the field, slipping through defenders with deft skill, but he was pulled down at the 24-yard mark. For this field, which was double the size of an actual gridiron football field due to the super strength of the players, such distance was accountable for another down. At the second scrimmage, the moment the ball was snapped, some offenders were injured due to the intensity of the clash, but Snow was able to throw the ball to Dale. Dale deftly caught the forward pass, but was instantly brought down after moving a few meters, facing Yuan, who tackled him to the ground. The field was filled with tension, as it seemed like the juniors were ready to do everything to stop the sophomores from scoring another point. "If they can pull the others down and not Godfrey, doesn't this mean he's physically stronger than most of the top boys in our class?" Rowana said. "Even John couldn't push him into the end zone," Usable muttered. "He's not worth anything if he can't get the ball," Lilith retorted with a confident tone. On the sophomore's third down, Snow gave a lateral pass to Orwin, who evaded one defender and tossed the ball backward from beneath his legs to Snow as the chaos around him grew heated. The moment the ball left him, everyone diverted their attention to Snow, who had already gotten into his stance. He hurtled the ball forward to the right. As it spiraled beautifully through the air, many eyes followed it. Godfrey leaped 3 meters high, catching the ball with both hands. Gregory's eyes widened. He saw that 2 juniors were with him. They jumped at the same time and even held Godfrey down, but even under such weight, Godfrey was able to reach 3 meters, successfully possessing the ball. Just then, when all that remained was for Godfrey to land and begin his run, ice burst out of the field, slamming him and the 2 juniors off the field and into the bleachers, opening a hole due to their crash. Edric raised his hands up. "Oops," he exclaimed with fake innocence as the referee tossed a yellow flag. It was a mistake, an honest mistake. Edric didn't speak much when an announcement was made swiftly, disqualifying him from the match. Echo was the only skill allowed during the game, and it was to be used on oneself, not directly offensive on others. Medics rushed over, led by the school nurse, Julia. The 2 juniors were unconscious with lots of cuts on their bodies, all done by the jagged ice. The chill had also seeped into their bodies. "Godfrey is inside the hole, bring him out." As Julia commanded the others, Godfrey came out from the hole in the bleachers. Julia's eyes widened at his left arm. The bone was broken, making his arm seem like it had an additional joint. White mist billowed off the arm. A diagram appeared, and Julia's dove flew out, releasing its healing light right after 2 medics snapped the bone back into place, giving Godfrey something to bite. His grunt was loud. At a certain point, cold brought an unbearable pain that exceeded a broken bone. It felt like one arm was gone. Isolde's golden-orange eyes were wide with anger. She could tell that Edric did that on purpose, even sacrificing 2 of his classmates in order to get Godfrey off the game on grounds of an injury. Though the damages like the cuts and broken bones could be fixed instantly, the chill would take a while to expel. "You won't be able to play. It's best if you rest, you've already tried," Julia said softly, staring at Godfrey's solemn face. She did not need a face reader to tell that Godfrey was angry. "I can still play," he replied. "But your arm," Julia exclaimed, but Godfrey rose to his feet, slowly clenching his fist and opening it. She could see his fingers tremble just from such a simple action. "I'm good." Godfrey walked back onto the field. If he left the field, Edric had succeeded, but that was the last thing he would do. "Where's Percival?" John asked, looking for Percival to replace Edric. "He's not going to back down easily. He's back on the field," Leofric said, and John looked, his eyes narrowing when he saw Godfrey back on the field. "Percival didn't show up and has not responded to his text," Yuan reported to John, whose expression changed when he heard that. This meant he had lost Edric and Percival. His ace wasn't there. Did this mean they would have to replace Edric with a second-rate player? He had thought Percival would be here by now, since he told him several times that he would be important from the second half. John clenched his fist. "His left arm isn't good. We can exploit that," Tank suggested, only for Godfrey to cover his left arm with golden plates. A pauldron at the shoulder, rerebrace at the upper arm, counter at the elbow, vambrace at the forearm, and gauntlet for the hand. It looked quite imposing as he clenched his gauntleted hand, and golden lightning crackled through it. "Is that allowed?" John turned to the referee, who went for an inquiry, and returned with a nod that took the smile from the juniors' faces. Apparently, it was equally just an echo. Since they could strengthen their skin with the hides of their summons, the armor was just like the hide of Godfrey's summon. Though it was quite dangerous, since one of his arms was down by a deliberate foul, it was permitted. Had they unintentionally made Godfrey even more of a threat at the expense of losing a talented player? This was a double loss. After playing until halftime, with the sophomores leading 31-30, shocking the crowd greatly, who were expecting a beatdown, the players were in the locker rooms. The rhythmic tapping of heels against the tiles fell into the ears of the juniors, who turned as the woman walked into their midst. It was the school nurse. She looked at John with a puzzled face. "You called me." John nodded. "It's for him." He gestured at Edric, who stood with a bare torso. His skin up to his face had become a dark shade of grey. His long claws were made of hard ice, and before Julia's eyes and that of his classmates, he sliced himself open. Edric's face contorted, but he endured, opening more claw wounds. "Why are you doing that?" Julia screamed, horrified at the sight, but a deep grunt made her snap back to John, or rather, to the Asian boy beside him. Yuan's body grew larger, his irises became crimson while his sclera turned pitch black. A ferocious aura burst out of him. Julia's eyes widened. She could sense Yuan had grown stronger under the influence of Edric's blood spilling to the ground. There was no doubt, he was one of the few whose summon relied on other things besides mana. For Yuan's case, it was blood. Luckily, Edric's wounds began to knit themselves, but it was quite slow. "I want you to heal Edric. He can't heal as fast when it's his own claws that do the damage," John said. Julia shivered internally before attending to Edric. Yuan exhaled, his fangs peeking out of his lips. "I'll be able to handle him in this state. Mori blood would have made me stronger, but this is enough." "Good," John rose to his feet. "We've been humiliated enough. We'll discover the secret for his surge in strength after the match is over." "It's just football. Leave us too and I'll rip his face open," Edric snarled. John spared him a side glance as they walked out of the locker. Intense cheering burst from the crowd once more as both teams walked into the field. The cheerleaders performed, but like the audience, they were split between John and Godfrey. The white-haired king and the golden-haired knight. The one-arm armor made Godfrey even more iconic on the field. After scoring several touchdowns, keeping up with John, he was now a renowned dark horse. The juniors kicked off the ball to the sophomores. One of them held it but was brought down, forcing them into a scrimmage. Snow received the ball and located Godfrey, tossing it over to him. Godfrey shot off like a bullet, the same run that had ended in several touchdowns, but halfway through, while deftly evading defenders, a blur slammed him out of bounds, shocking the sophomores. Isolde blinked several times in shock. Yuan stood up, breathing out before shooting Godfrey a side glance, eyes gleaming with menace. "No more running unchecked, Daniels." Since they had another down, Orwin snapped the ball to Snow once more. He spotted Godfrey, but Tank slammed into him mid-run, forcing Godfrey to frown. It was declared a foul, and the next scrimmage was where the foul occurred. but Godfrey was still tightly covered, so Snow tossed the ball to Dale. Jolts of lightning burst off the bottom of his feet as he ran, evading defenders, while his blocker crashed into those who tried to stop him. When they finally jumped him, Dale threw the ball backward to Siegfried, who still wasn't in the clear. In a second, he would also be jumped, but he tossed the ball laterally. It made a curve midair, and Godfrey caught it. Tank turned back in shock. He had expected them to give up Godfrey for his play, so he chased after whoever had the ball. That small space was enough for Godfrey, who shot forward. A great number of points and the threat of Edwin were on the line. This was the last event the school had before the semester was over. Once it was lost, there was no recovery. Because of this, the sophomores had to work together despite their differences. Understanding this, Godfrey blasted forward, but as if expecting it, John was right on his tail, gaining on him with ease. John's speed was on another level. The hearts of everyone rose as they saw John close the gap with every step. "John's probably fed up," Usible said, watching as John finally got into range. He lunged at Godfrey as Godfrey leaned toward his left, but then with a sudden shift, Godfrey went right. It was so fast he left a faint blur of himself. It felt like his bone almost snapped for moving at such velocity unprepared. Yet even such a feint didn't free him from John. The king was still able to leap for him. Godfrey front-flipped, and John's fingers grazed the dirt on his boots. John couldn't believe his eyes as he crashed to the ground, and Godfrey ran undeterred to the end zone. The shock stayed with him until the end of the game, the sophomores winning with a staggering 74-68. At the locker room, he pulled off his helmet and slammed it on the bench, proceeding to slam the locker until it was deformed beyond recognition. He was the king. The last king was better at everything, even until he left with the other seniors to the moon. And the king before that also set an unprecedented record, yet he had humiliated himself in the field, and what's worse, before someone who had trained for just 1 week. Although John didn't utter a word, none of the juniors in the room spoke either. They could hear the sophomores celebrating from the other side. "Godfrey's the problem," Leofric said grimly. "Shut up," John glared at him. The sophomores ceased their celebration as the upperclassmen walked into their locker room. John smiled. "You all did good. I honestly did not expect it." He turned to Godfrey. "I hope you remain just friends with Isolde. I don't want the spreading rumors to continue." Godfrey, who was seated, glanced at him from the corner of his eyes, like when you tried to kiss her in public and you were rejected. Edric flared. Seeing that Edric was about to attack him, Godfrey rose up, but John stopped Edric. Dale's eyes narrowed greatly as he saw Godfrey, one student, standing defiantly against John, Yuan, Edric, the triplets and Tank. 1 against 7. 7 of the most powerful boys in Manhattan. Was he insane? "The scared kitten has grown to be brave," Ulrich said with a slight raise of his lips. John shook his head with a light smile. "Let's go." He turned and walked away with the other boys, leaving the sophomores holding their hearts. Godfrey might be strong, but he was against John, who alone could handle the others in Nexus Club. Then there was Yuan, the blood beast who just didn't seem to have an upper limit in strength. As long as it kept getting bloody, he grew stronger. Edric could regenerate like it was nothing, and his self-healing was a perfect one, meaning there would not even be a scratch left. As long as it wasn't his own claws, he could heal in an instant. The flames of the triplets were terrifying, and once their summons merged, their strength rose rapidly. Tank had incredible defense with lightning of greater destructive capability than Dale. He was like a higher version of Dale, but with a rhino as his summon. This group was terrifying on their own, but together, even an experienced high-ranked guild party filled with combatants or a team of agents had a great chance of losing. Seeing them leave gave the sophomore students great relief. To celebrate their win, Edwin took the sophomores to an eatery. Walking away from the rowdy bunch eating and talking about the game, Godfrey approached the counter. He looked back through the floor-to-ceiling window, but still didn't see Isolde. "Where's she?" As he turned and made his order, a sweet scent made him turn, raising an eyebrow at the brown-skinned girl leaning against the counter. She wasn't far. In fact, she was quite close. Godfrey recognized her as one of the cheerleaders during the game, Rowana. "Hi," she greeted with a sweet tone. "You played really well today." "Thank you," Godfrey replied with a complimentary smile. "Isn't that Rowana?" A sophomore's eyes widened. Rowana's cute smile froze when an icy voice cut deep into her from behind. Haven't you ordered what you came for? Hearing that voice, Godfrey turned and saw Isolde walking up to them. Rowana quickly left while Isolde stood by the counter, flipped her hair, and shot Godfrey a side glance. The staff who brought Godfrey's order sighed inwardly. To have beautiful girls being jealous over me was the dream. He looked around his workplace, a place he didn't dream of, before looking at Godfrey. Godfrey, on the other hand, was confused at the staff's envious glance. In a mansion located in a Blue Gate dungeon on an island close to Manhattan, a woman in slippers walked into a massive room with a lofty ceiling. All around the room were top-grade paintings, some abstract, some lifelike, some that looked like they had no meaning, just a cluster of different colors, but they all did, and each had a name. Each one was a revelation their daughter had. Even before she started speaking, she had already begun to draw. Back then, it made no sense why she preferred drawing so much, but with time, everything began to fit in. All this, each painting, was something that had yet to happen or had already happened. Christine Pendragon went straight to a broad-backed man in a white shirt with folded sleeves and plain black pants. He held a glass of wine while staring at one of the paintings, his back to Christine. He didn't even turn when she entered. "You're always looking at that picture every time you return." She pecked the man's cheek while holding him from behind. "How's the situation?" Arthur sighed softly. "It's getting out of hand to keep the invasion within control. The number of dungeons popping up on a daily basis is outrageous. Dungeon breaks are frequent despite making sure they're being cleared. It's like the respawn rate lost its cooldown. The worst of it all is the Green Gate dungeon. Some cities are engulfed in it." Arthur tilted his head to Christine. "The peace we've built might not last." "Is it because of him?" Christine looked at the painting before them. It was a mixture of colors that somehow depicted characters. The background had a pitch-black shade, and the first character on the painting had what looked like a grey hoodie, but some strands of golden hair came out from under the hood. Behind him were 8 golden touches of paint that made up humanoid figures. They were all bigger than the one in the grey hoodie. Written under a sun at the top of the painting, whose light couldn't chase away the darkness, was "Vagabond." The gold ink dripped like tears, stopping just above the figures depicted in the painting. One of the more visible golden figures had tendrils of gold from his back. Some went upward, some touched the earth, as it hovered above the grey-hooded individual like an angel. "I could kill him now," Arthur said solemnly, "but it won't change the fate of mankind. At least with a known future, we can prepare for what's coming. Don't forget Alexis, Isolde's older brother. You interfered, and his end cost more than we expected. Isolde can see the fate of those she's shown. It doesn't mean we can divert them." Christine caressed Arthur's tensed shoulders, giving a gentle advice in case Arthur came back to such thought. "Our daughter has also grown quite fond of the boy." Arthur's eyes went wide. "What? Why did you allow her to go there in the first place?" "It's already too late. Unless you want the boy to appear at your doorstep seeking his friend, we best stay clear." Christine chuckled. Arthur scowled. "You know," Christine said, squinting at the painting, "I've always wondered why that fourth knight and his warhorse are considered one summon. Are they not supposed to be different?" She gestured to one of the knights behind the one with wings, almost lost in the darkness, on what looked like a horse. Arthur waved his hand, dismissing it. "Isolde will soon return. Make sure she trains." This spike in dungeon appearances, as much as it seems to be tied to the public appearance of a summoner with way more summons than we've ever seen, the actual cause of it are Kane's fanatics, and they want to bring back the Great Despair. Eventually, the last day of the semester came. Godfrey leaned against the wall, in between 2 windows, staring at Isolde, Isaac, and Lucy, who looked at the room with different expressions. One expression that could be found in each of them was surprise. Isolde's was mild. Isaac, on the other hand, even gasped audibly. "What's this?" Isolde asked, facing Godfrey. "This is the room the headmaster assigned for our club. It's official, but I still don't have a name for it yet," he replied. "This is good news." Isaac went to the window while Lucy had a smile. Isolde tilted her head as she saw the tensed expression Godfrey wore after his smile vanished. "Is there something you want to say?" Everyone turned to him. Godfrey exhaled, rubbing his palms before looking at the ceiling for a short moment, and then back at them. "I recently discovered that I'm a King Tier summoner. At least, I have the potential to be one," Godfrey said, and Isaac's face morphed into absolute shock. Isolde blinked while Lucy gasped excitedly. "So you're really the Shadow King?" Knowing he had King Tier potential, Godfrey also knew that the next door might be the last door. At least once it was unsealed, he would have 4 summons. In the entire world, there were only a handful of them, and most had much weaker summons. It was usually something like a small pack of wolves, and most of them weren't too different in tiers. I found a name for the club, Isaac said, his eyes glowing with excitement at the wondrous idea that just popped into his head. Since you're the Shadow King already, why don't we name our club Shadow Club or Shadow Hunter Club? Shadow Club sounds better, Isolde replied. Shadow Club it is, Isaac finalized without waiting for Godfrey or Lucy's own idea. Isolde will be the Shadow Queen, I'll be the Shadow Knight, and Lucy will be the Shadow Sage. These were already key positions in the school's hierarchy. Isaac just slapped Shadow at the front and made it theirs. How about we make it more balanced? Since we're going to be accommodating people from the freshman year to seniors, it should be Shadow King, Shadow Queen, Shadow Knight, Shadow Ace, Shadow Sage, 2 Shadow Rooks, Shadow Joker, and 8 pawns. Only the pawns will be numbered. Godfrey, what do you think? Godfrey cleared his throat. Sounds big. Nexus Club handles missions sent to them by the authorities, which are filtered by the school board, but we're going to be hunting on our own, the underground version of Nexus Club. No one controls us, Isolde said. If there was one thing John was right about, it was that he did need more hands to handle the burden. He just had rotten hands. For now, we only have the King, Queen, Sage, and Knight. We'll find people for other positions next semester, Godfrey said, crossing his arms. Isaac stretched, looking at the bright scenery outside. It's bye-bye to Manhattan's beauty. You're my mentor, Godfrey, but better train. Next semester is the cross-class tournament. We freshmen are going to face you sophomores, and you guys are going to face the juniors. It's going to be intense. You didn't even complete your exercise yesterday, and you're blabbering, Godfrey scowled. Isaac's eyes widened. You increased it to 250. I heard the seniors are going to be back next semester. I wonder what it was like living on the moon, Lucy said softly. Where's Isolde? Godfrey suddenly turned and discovered Isolde was gone. Before he could move, she appeared in a violet flash with cardboard paper and paint. Let's paint our club's name. What vibe should it have? She asked as all of them gathered around the table, picking scissors, rulers, and other stuff to begin their craft. Godfrey came out of a taxi with a traveling bag. He walked into a towering structure of glass and metal, Skyline 88. One of the best luxury apartment complexes in Manhattan. After staying in the headmaster's second house for a while, and almost destroying it during their training, his mother rented a 3-bedroom apartment in this complex. It had security, a pool, and many other things one could enjoy during this 1-month break, but for Godfrey, he wanted to spend this month learning how to properly wield a sword and store up enough mana, as much as he could. And the final goal was to increase Mountain's tier. With his goals occupying his mind, he walked into the elevator. As the door began to close, Godfrey sighted Percival racing for it like his life was on the line. He quickly pressed the door open button, and the third-year student crashed into the elevator, slamming the metal wall. What's his deal? Godfrey thought, looking out the door until it closed, but he couldn't find who or what he was running from. What are? Godfrey's voice died, his eyes widening as Percival's common brown hair became silky and pale blue. His olive skin became white, giving him looks that rivaled Snow's angelic face. Thank you, Percival said, turning his head to Godfrey, whose eyes narrowed as he spotted the burn mark at the right side of Percival's cheek, just before his lips. All of a sudden, Percival's eyes widened. What are you doing here? Don't you live in Amazon City? We moved, Godfrey replied, still in disbelief. Oh, Percival turned away. You played well during the game. Thanks, Godfrey replied. That was all. They both stood in a nonchalant silence until the elevator reached its destination. As Godfrey walked out, he was surprised. Percival also walked out, both eyeing each other from the corner of their eyes. Percival, Valentina's eyes widened while beside her, a woman held her mouth. Is that Godfrey? He's grown so much, he's even as tall as my son. Percival scowled internally. I'm definitely taller. He was 185 while Godfrey was 183, but the difference wasn't much. What's going on? Godfrey left his bag. Godfrey, Valentina approached her son and held his hand, drawing him close to the other woman. This is Mrs. Joy, the doctor that brought you out of my tummy. Godfrey's eyes slowly widened in surprise. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.
Hello.